Miss Leader here. A quick note before I jump into this content. These videos that you will get for all of Unit 2 in Semester B are the information about Ohio's state and local governments. You will need to watch these videos to the end because you will not get the content from these videos in your lessons in Connexus. And the quick checks are made about Ohio-specific content. The reason why we're giving you this information in video form is that you will need this information when you take your end of course exam later in the school year. Okay, so this video is specifically about Ohio's local governments. Ohio has 88 counties. So a county government is one example of a local government that we have here in Ohio. Other examples are municipalities, which is just a fancy word for towns or cities, townships, school boards, and special districts. So each county, all 88 counties in Ohio, they only have the power given to them by the Ohio Constitution, which means that their power is actually quite limited. Towns and school boards, they actually have more power because they get to decide what are the things that they can do, whereas the counties only can do the things that the Ohio government specifically tells them that they can do, okay? So take a look at the map here and maybe make note of what county you live in. Counties are important. So I live here in Union County, so I am just right outside of Columbus, Ohio. Columbus is in Franklin County, and we have Cleveland over here in Cuyahoga, and we have Cincinnati down here in Hamilton County and a little bit in Claremont. So these counties are important specifically for elections because elections are all run by each county board of elections, okay? Municipalities, your towns and cities, they all have local governments. However, if you don't live in a town, like I specifically live out in the country, my local form of government is actually a township. So each of the 88 counties is then broken down into smaller little chunks called townships, okay? So my township is the one that sets terms for what you can build on your property and what you can't, like how big of a barn you have, what kind of water you drink, who takes up your trash. These kinds of things are decided by towns and townships, and they're all governed by elected officials, okay? School boards also are run by elected officials, okay? And their entire job is to run the school district in that area, okay? And then we have other special districts. Sometimes there will be a special district for like a watershed, which just means this is the area where all of the water comes from, and there might be a special district for something like that. So what do all of these governments do? Well, these governments, they don't all provide the exact same things, but especially the more local the government, the more local to your life and the things that you do every day. So, for example, local governments provide water services. If you live in town, you will have a water treatment plant to make sure that everyone is getting clean water to drink. If you live out in the country, you may not. So specifically, I do not, and I have a well under my house that gives me water. Also, we have our own sewage. It's called like a leach field, but if you live in town, your sewage is part of the water treatment plant, and that is all governed and run by your local town or city. Trash services, sometimes those are things that people have to pay for themselves, but sometimes it is provided by your city. Roads and bridges are always maintained by these local governments. So for example, if you live on a road called a Township Road 90, then the township is the one that clears the snow and maintains the bridge or the road. Whereas if it's a state route, then the state of Ohio will do that. But generally, there is almost no federal involvement from the national government in Washington, D.C. when it comes to roads and bridges. That is all state governments and local governments. Snow removal is always local, okay? Emergency services like police, fire, paramedics. Those are all run by local governments, often townships or towns. And schools. So maintaining and run schools are done by the local school districts, and those are always based off of where you live. Local governments also regulate speed limits. So when you are in town, that is decided on by the town government, what the speed limits are, okay? If it's a state highway or an interstate, those are all regulated by the state, okay? Marriage licenses, hunting licenses, fishing licenses, these are all done by either the state of Ohio or the local government, okay? Hunting and fishing licenses are run by the state of Ohio. Marriage licenses are issued specifically by the county in which you will get married. And driving licenses are also issued by the state of Ohio. The last thing that these local governments do are pass local laws. These are called ordinances, okay? So if you've ever heard, like I see this a lot on YouTube, these like fun facts about like in the town of Springfield, you can't walk your iguana on a leash on the street. Okay, those kinds of crazy things. Those are all local ordinances, okay? So a specific example that I can think of, I live in between two towns, and the one town, you are not allowed to sell propane tanks in the city limits, but you can in the other town. So those are things that are local ordinances, okay? So how do we pay for these services? Okay, I just gave you a big list of services: water, trash, sewage, roads, bridges. All of these things cost money. So how do we pay for these? Well, we pay for these out of taxes, okay? Sales tax is always local to the county, okay? So every county in Ohio has a different percentage sales tax. So sales tax are the taxes that you pay when you buy things, okay? You go to Kroger to buy your groceries and you buy some toothpaste while you're there. There is going to be a tax on that, right? So that is a sales tax. So everyone pays those when we buy things. Income tax. Income tax is deducted from your paycheck, okay? So here's an example of a paycheck right over here, and you can see is enlarged for you to see: FICA, Social Security, Medicare, federal income tax, state income tax. This is the money that is just taken out of your paycheck for you. So it's not something that you have to physically go pay. Another way that we raise money to pay for these things are levies. Okay, so a levy is a tax that is voted on by the people that live there, and then they all agree to pay a certain percentage of their income, and then that money goes to support that service. So, for example, where I live, we just had a levy for our school district because my children's school needs some new school buildings, and so we passed a levy. So now that money is going to come out of my paycheck, but it is going to go towards building new schools. So levies. You also often see levies for fire departments and police and paramedics, okay? And then that money, again, is directly taken out of your paycheck and it is used to fund those things. Also, there are things called excise, okay? So it doesn't say exercise, it's excise tax, which basically just means extra. So an extra tax on certain goods. Typically, these are goods that the government wants to discourage people from using. So things like alcohol has a higher tax rate. Cigarettes have higher tax rates. The gas tax is not something that we're trying to discourage people from using, but they use the gas tax specifically to help maintain the roads, because if you are driving a car, then you are using the roads, and those roads need to be maintained. So there are three branches in every level of government. So the examples of the three branches of government that we have, this little drawing down here, this is an example of executive, legislative, and judicial. These big fancy buildings are all ones we would see in Washington, D.C. We have those three branches at the state level and the local level too. In the state of Ohio, we have our Ohio court system. We have an Ohio Supreme Court, and then we have lots of lower courts below that. We also have an executive branch in Ohio, and the head of that is the governor and lieutenant governor. And then we have a legislative branch in Ohio, which is called the Ohio General Assembly, and they're the ones that make laws. At the local level, there are also judicial branches. So there are city courts and county courts. Then we also have an executive branch at the local level. Often it is a mayor or a county commissioner or sometimes a city council, and they're the ones who enforce all of those laws at the local level. And then we also have the legislative branch. So city councils are the ones that tend to make those local ordinances I just mentioned, okay?